count continues. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Jeff?
The day you count on for terror is not over. Friday the 13th, Part 2, rated R.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1981 horror sequel, Friday the 13th, Part 2. Now, Friday the 13th, Part 2 is the second installment in the Friday the 13th franchise. It wasn't as financially profitable as the first, since it only made around $21 million on a $1.25 million budget. It got even more bad reviews from critics, but it has its fans, and I am definitely one of them. I like this film. I think it's honestly a little underrated. It tends to be one of the more overlooked entries in the series, and I honestly don't get why that's the case. This is not only one of my favorites from this franchise, but it's also one of my favorite slasher films from this decade of the 1980s. I think it's an improvement over the first in many different ways, and I think it's an enjoyable, fun slasher. So it's directed by Steve Miner, who replaces Shaughnessy Cunningham in the director's chair, and I felt that, for the most part, he was a slight upgrade over Shaughnessy Cunningham. I felt the way that he handled the variety of shots was better. I felt that he definitely was a little more creative when it comes to how he incorporated certain camera angles into sequences, and also how he used those camera angles and POVs and different approaches with his directing to emphasize and enhance the film's mood and atmosphere. There's some shots in this that are really quite good. I love the shot of Jason when he's holding the knife, and it's from his point of view as he's about to kill one of the girls in the film. I think it's a really nice looking shot. I like the way it's lit. I like the way that it's set up. And I like the way that he directed the sequence when Jason reveals his face, when he busts through the window near the end of the film. And overall, I think it's a good job. I think he did a nice job directing the film, injected a nice amount of energy, and overall I feel it's a consistent film too when it comes to the quality of direction. There really aren't moments with this film where things fall flat in that regard, and for a relatively new filmmaker, because Steve Miner had done some stuff prior, but he wasn't a big name. It's not like he was a well-known filmmaker at the time. I thought he did a really, I wouldn't say remarkable job, but he did, without a doubt, at the very least, an above average job. And for someone that was just kind of getting their feet wet with directing, that's really quite impressive. Now, the film features a screenplay by Ron Kurz, and I thought this was a solid script. I really, for the most part, thought that this screenplay had a lot of things about it that were terrific. For one, I really do prefer the way that the characters are written here and the way that they are handled. There's much more dynamic involved in terms of the different personalities. I felt the wit that was there was funnier and less obnoxious versus the wit that was on display in the last film. And I also really do prefer Jason. I prefer Jason as the main slasher villain than Mrs. Voorhees, because the way that the character of Jason is written here, it's not only more intimidating when it comes to the presence of the killer, but it's also something that makes more sense. There was a lot of suspending your disbelief that had to occur when it comes to Miss Voorhees being the one doing all the killing in the last film. So the script here doesn't have to deal with that constraint. And on top of that, it manages to make you sympathize with Jason in some ways. Not entirely. Definitely not to the point where you justify his killing spree, but enough where you do feel for Jason. Because think about it. He has spent most of his life being tortured, being tormented because of his appearance and because of his disabilities that he was born with. He had a traumatic experience in terms of a near-death situation, drowning in a lake. The only person in his life that's ever loved him or ever shown him any compassion or ever cared was his mother. And she dies in front of his eyes. She gets decapitated. So you can look at his killing spree in a lot of ways as the result of a mental breakdown. So you do feel for Jason to an extent. And I feel the screenplay did a good job making you feel that way. And a big part of that is that whole campfire scene. I love that scene so much because it perfectly exemplifies the vibe and the atmosphere of a campfire, of the scary story around the campfire. And it also brings a lot of mythology into the series. And I just really enjoy that scene. And there's a lot of scenes in this film that I really like. And that's just one of them. I like the fact that Jason has a different appearance than other films in the series. It's nice as a one-off, because if he just went on wearing a bag over his head for the rest of the film, I mean, for the rest of the film franchise, that wouldn't work. But as a one-off, I like it. I think it's a creepy look with the sack over his face and the one eye that's sticking out. And it's also one of those films where the plot at the end of the day is very simple, very straightforward. It's getting closer to another Friday the 13th after the events of the first film, because this takes place pretty soon after the events of the first movie. And there's another group of teenagers that decide to hang out around the lake, around Camp Crystal Lake, and they don't heed the warnings. But this time around, they don't just go straight to the camp. Most of it takes place actually in this area that's a little farther away from the camp. So it's not like they just set up shop when it comes to this training service for camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. It's actually taking place near Camp Crystal Lake, but it's not actually taking place at the camp. So I like that. That was a nice little change that made it feel a little different. And the characters here, you do have some similar personalities to what you had in the first film, but then you have more diversity in a lot of different ways. You have characters like Mark, who's in a wheelchair, and I just feel in a lot of ways these characters are stronger. Not only because they have more personality and there's more in the screenplay for them to really sink their teeth into, but also when it comes to characters like the lead and Ginny, there's more of an arc to this character. There's more where you see this character go through moments where she's terrified and she can barely even move. And in one scene, she actually pees her pants, but then has the mental fortitude to think on her feet and trick Jason by putting on his mother's sweater and play mind games with him to the point where she gets the upper hand. That is something that really works when it comes to the screenplay. And the kills. The creativity here is definitely something that is worth noting. Um, you have the javelin spear through not only one body, but through two bodies. You have the butcher knife to the face, which winds up killing Mark and then sends his wheelchair tumbling down the stairs. In another shot that I really like from Steve Miner. Uh, and it's, I think, a big reason why that shot works so well is because it's a wide shot. It's a wide shot of the wheelchair tumbling down the stairs while there's lightning in the background and it's raining like crazy. And there's other moments too that are really uh, visceral and quite brutal in terms of the gore. Uh, the poor girl who gets stabbed with the kitchen knife, Vicky. Um, I guess it wasn't a butcher knife that Mark gets killed with. It was a machete. My bad. There's some kills that were just meh, like the guy who gets killed with an hammer and claw in the back of his head. I think it was a cop. He goes in and tries to investigate what's going on in the woods, finds Jason's hideout, and then gets killed. Um, Scott, who gets caught with a trap, gets caught with a rope and gets hung upside down and then gets his throat slit. Um, Trying to see what other kills there are here. Um, yeah, Terry gets killed off screen. That's one that was a little disappointing. Why was she killed off screen? Uh, that seemed like a missed opportunity there. But yeah, there's some nice kills in this. Mainly the one where the couple gets impaled with the spear, and there's also the death of Walt Gorney's character, Crazy Ralph, who gets garroted, I think with barbed wire or something along those lines. But yeah, it definitely does deliver when it comes to the kills. And I felt for the most part this was a great cast. Amy Steele is amazing as Ginny. I really like this character, and I thought she did a remarkable job bringing this character to life. She's my kind of woman. She's resourceful. She's able to think for herself, think on her feet. She's strong, while also being sexy, but in a way that isn't stereotypical or your average supermodel. I like that aspect of her, and I just really love this character. I love the portrayal of this character by Amy Steele. She also had a nice sense of humor, and she just was someone who wasn't afraid to speak her mind either. Like that whole scene where she's at the diner or the bar and she's talking about Jason and how she really does believe that he's alive. And Paul's like, "What are you doing? Maybe you've been drinking too much." She's like, "No, I really do believe that he's still out there." And I like that. I like that about her so much. And speaking of Paul, I also really like John Furey's performance as Paul Holt. This is a character that was funny, had a lot of charm and charisma. Yes, the charm at times was a little dopey, but there was a certain appeal to that. And I liked the dynamic between him and Amy Steele. Adrienne King, she's back as Alice. I will say this when it comes to the screenplay, I forgot to mention this, but the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie is just mostly flashbacks and scenes from the first film that are intercut into some nightmare sequence. So there really isn't much new there. And I would have preferred Adrienne King's character Alice to have died a more heroic death instead of the way that she did ultimately die here. I would have preferred her to go missing and disappear, but not really be dead, and then show up again and die heroically trying to save Paul and Ginny from Jason in the film's finale. But they decided to go the route that they went, and, it is what it is. Steve Dash as Jason Voorhees, I really liked his take on this character. I liked the vulnerability he brought to this character, as well as his take on Jason's rage and Jason's intensity. And he deserves way more credit than he gets. Fuck Warrington Gillette. For everything I've heard about this guy, he's a total asshole. And the way that he spent all these years taking credit for being Jason when really he was only Jason for maybe one or two shots. And Steve Dash did the rest because Warrington Gillette was such a dumbass, he couldn't do things properly. So it's really frustrating to see him take all of his credit from Steve Dash. Steve Dash, I thought, was a solid Jason. He was the first to really portray Jason when it comes to him being the lead in a film from this franchise, in terms of the lead killer. And I really do feel Steve Dash started things off on a really good foot, and may he rest in peace. The rest of the cast was good too. Stu Charno was Ted Bowen. He was the comic relief. I actually chuckled a couple times at his antics. I like the guy. Lauren Marie Taylor is Vicky. Marta Kober is Sandra. Tom McBride is Mark. I really liked Mark. It was really too bad what happened to him. Really too bad what happened to Mark in terms of he's about to get laid. Mark's about to get some poontang, and then Jason fucking kills his ass with a machete. And then he goes and kills Vicky later. Really liked Lauren Marie Taylor's performance as Vicky too. She was cute. She was sweet. She also had a bit of a dangerous side to her, a wild side. Then you have other actors like Jeff and characters like Jeff and Terry and Scott, played by Bill Randolph, Kirsten Baker, and Russell Todd. Definitely want to mention want to talk about Kirsten Baker, because not only did she hold her own when it comes to her performance, when it comes to the little bit that she was asked to do, but she was drop dead gorgeous, and she definitely did bear all. And you got Walt Gorney back as Crazy Ralph, and Betsy Palmer as Pamela Voorhees, because she records a couple lines of dialogue for the sequence near the end when Ginny tricks Jason into thinking that his mother is talking to him. And those performances were good too. Walt Gorney, I was fine with him here because I don't really care for the character Crazy Ralph, so seeing him die was kind of like, yay, I don't have to see this guy anymore. Now we can Focus on something else. Now you're the one who's doomed, Crazy Ralph. But yeah, good cast. Harry Manfredini returns and does a score here. He performs a couple tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's really the same score. But it works. It's effective. It's an effective score when it comes to creating a certain sense of dread and tension. The cinematography by Peter Stein, I thought was good. Wasn't great, but it was good. Certain shots definitely did have a punch to them, or a lot of highlights when it comes to the way that they're shot. And the editing by Susan E. Cunningham, I thought it was very tight. It was very polished. And it goes by at a really quick pace. It's 87 minutes. But really, the bulk of the film, the bulk of the new story that isn't just flashback footage for the most part, it's like over an hour. And it goes by like that, like a flash. It's completely fast. It's a really fast-paced, fun ride in a lot of ways. And yeah, the twist at the end is a little clunky in terms of the dream sequence. I guess it seems like it might be a dream sequence when Jason breaks through the window, but then it might not be, so it's a little muddled in that regard. Also, once again, where the fuck is Paul? Don't know. They really didn't handle that too well when it comes to the screenplay. But other than stuff like Paul going missing in the final act, Adrienne King and the way that they handled Alice's character, and the fact that the gore wasn't kept in the film, I like Friday the 13th Part 2. I think it's a really solid sequel.